Maybe she starts, that's fine.
Just go whenever?
Yep.
Okay. Feminine and masculine are the words that are associated to women and men. The words that have been used to describe the way a man or woman should behave based on their gender. Women should be feminine and men should be masculine. Feminine is described as nurturing, submissive, gentle, independent, etc. On the other hand, masculine is described as characteristics such as strong, dominating, opinionated, and independent. But where do these characteristics come from? How were femininity and masculinity created? How did these gender roles come to be? Gender roles are social constructs rather than genetically influenced. Scientists have argued about how gender roles are constructed for years. Many believe femininity and masculinity are influenced by our genes. I am here to argue otherwise. I believe that there are logical theories stating that gender behaviors are pressured onto us by society. In addition, I have experience of my own that will help support this claim. Genetics only influence our genitals. Freud's theory of ego, superego, and id are here to prove that fact. The id and superego consists of this. The id consists of inherited traits. The id is basically your human basic needs. Your superego is what reality says you're supposed to act like, and your ego mediates between the two. If you didn't have those three basic things, there would be no rule of gender roles. So those things help construct these roles. My evidence for part 2 is Freud's theory of oral, anal, and phallic stages. The oral, anal, and phallic stages are what produce society's pressure onto us. Oral stage is the first stage. It's marked the importance of the mouth in receiving pleasure. While the second stage is the anal stage. And during the anal stage is when you get potty trained. Here is when the child finds out that you can find pleasure in helping or pleasing others. In other words, when the child does toilet training, they figure out that they can give pleasure by doing what society wants. And the phallic stage is when the child understands that they are different from other people. I'm a boy, you are a girl, I have this, you don't. And there they realize that they may be superior than the girl, they may be this or that, and then they realize that society is constructing them into how this is what a boy behaves, this is how a girl behaves. Society's pressure constructs gender roles. The Marxist theory of early societies helps support this claim. Marxist theory on society starts with the observation and the production of tools from the threshold of human society. Basically, when tools were created during the caveman time is when society actually began. During that time, there was no difference between men and women. Everyone was the same. They gave birth, men did this, it was all the same. No one had hierarchy over the other. But through the tools, the construction of society and technology, men put power over women, and society started to create gender roles. My claim to number 3 would be my own gender identity was put onto me by society and the need to conform rather than my genes. As a very young child, I played soccer from 8 years old up. I was very boyish and masculine because I grew up with 3 boys and it was my own nature. But being the fact that society tells me to conform, I had to create a more feminine structure as growing up. So basically, once in high school and passed on, I had to see how everyone else was treating me and how I should act because I was bullied for being too masculine or not being the way you should behave, I would say. So through that way, I had to act more feminine. The debate of how gender roles have been created has been an ongoing battle since our creation. While many think gender roles are a product of our genes, they are in fact constructed onto us by society. In Freud's theory, we see the genes biologically influence our sex, while our gender roles are psychological makeup of society. Marxist theory discusses how early societies didn't have gender roles because they are influenced by today's society rather than our biology. As a woman who went from being masculine to being very feminine as a product of society, I am living proof of this construction.
Wait. You have to wait because I'm going to be doing comments after each speech. So thank you for rushing, but, give me a moment. All right, let's start with a couple of things that are pretty positive. I think you have a nice presentation to the audience. You're very direct and authoritative when you're speaking. Your voice projects well, and your personal examples give you some confidence in talking about that particular subject. I also thought that you had a pretty good statement of what the proposition is, although you don't really highlight it in the introduction, and so if people are not listening carefully, which is one of the problems with audiences, they don't always listen very carefully, they might have missed what the claim was that you were presenting. However, I knew what it was. I was listening and I got it, so that helps. And then the follow-up is there's not really a preview of what the structure is going to be, but you do have some individual signposts as you go along. Sometimes they're clearer than others. You just dive right into the Freudian thing. When you get to the Marxist interpretation, I did think there was a numerical signpost. And finally, when you're using your personal examples, that was relatively clear as well. So that's pretty good. And you explain the theories well, so I think you're doing okay there. The problem is that there's no evidence in the presentation. For example, at one point you claimed that there was no, basically masculine hierarchy among primitive men before they had tools. That's a complete assertion on your part. There's no expert that's cited. There's no historical information or antecedent for that kind of information, and you need some information that shows that. You present the two theories about, these gender roles, so to speak, in philosophical positions here, but none of that is directly quoted from either Freud or from Marx. It sounds like somebody else's interpretation, but we're not getting any source citation on that. There's no statistical information that deals with this that suggests that this is true. For example, if I was responding to this and talking about masculine versus feminine roles and whether or not it's gender-based, one of the first things I'd be looking at is crime statistics, which suggest overwhelmingly that there is, in fact, a genetic relationship to certain kinds of behaviors, especially criminal behaviors and aggression. On the personal examples, they're pretty good. I mean, I think you do a good job explaining them, but all you've got is the one personal example, and we don't know how accurate that is. It's not necessarily generalizable. So there are a couple problems there. So the weakness here is the lack of evidence on these particular points, and there are some places where you definitely need to develop that a little bit more. Thank you for being first.